Welcome back to Movies TV Mad, and welcome to Monday's edition of the Movies TV Mad Daily. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. Why Superman Returns deserves the sequel. Superman Returns is a really unique moment in the history of Superman. Bryan Singer jumped ship from his successful X-Men movies, his X-Men sequel, to make a Superman movie. This was a big thing for Bryan, it really was, because he loved Dick Donner's Superman movie. I love Superman Returns. Now, the movie isn't without its problems. I mean, we're just talking about a 5-year gap between Superman 2 and Superman Returns. And the location, the sets, look nothing like the sets and locations from the first movie. Mistake number one. You're continuing from Superman 2, but you never reference the 3 villains from Krypton. Right, Terrence Stamp played Zod in Superman 1 and 2. He was voicing Jor-El in Smallville, so he could have easily voiced Zod in Superman Returns. What you could have done was, when Lex Luthor goes to visit the Fortress of Solitude, what they could have said was that Superman actually imprisoned the 3 villains in the fortress. So they're kind of in the walls. They're imprisoned in the walls of the fortress. A panel rises. And, you know, he starts talking to Lex Luthor and says, listen, we can never leave here, but we can advise you how to get revenge on the son of Jor-El. So they advise him. And they want to rebuild Krypton as well. So they come up with an idea for New Krypton. So basically you've got this kind of Hannibal Lecter scenario where Lex Luthor, Kevin Spacey, goes to the fortress and he's advised by General Zod. So you would have brought back Terrence Stamp as General Zod for a little cameo there. But that is one of my issues with Superman Returns. As much as I love it, it doesn't feel like a continuation of Superman 2, because none of the kind of narratives from those films are brought back up. Now, there's a few throwaway lines, like when he's on the plane and he says it's the safest way to travel. I get that. But despite all of that, I really like Superman Returns. I think that the casting's pretty good. Kate Bosworth's a really good actor. Now, I don't think you or I would have cast Kate Bosworth as Lois Lane, but there you have it. I don't think she's a terrible Lois Lane. She's just not anywhere near one of the best. But the cast is very good. I think the story is really good, and the idea that Superman's been away for 5 years searching for the remains of Krypton is a brilliant idea. Cutting out the Return to Krypton sequence for me was a mistake. So he was trying to continue the Dick Donner Superman. I've just explained to you why there's elements of trying to do that where he got wrong. It's got to look like that world. You can interject your own stuff into it like Singer does, but they're the mistakes he made as far as I'm concerned, because if the audience see the same world that they saw in Superman the movie and Superman 2, and it looks like that world, I think people are going to find it more relatable, and more people would have went to see the movie. Now, this movie made just under 400 million. This movie cost 200 million to make. It just about doubled its budget, but simply not good enough for a Superman movie, or a movie that's cost 200 million to make. I understand why Warner Brothers didn't go forward with it, but I still think the sequel sounded awesome. And, you know, as Bryan described, it was going to be a Wrath of Khan, Empire Strikes Back type of movie. The idea was to introduce Brainiac. No one in a film, I know we've seen it in Krypton in Smallville, but no one in a movie has ever had a live-action Brainiac. And I like the idea of Bryan Singer's live-action Brainiac. He arrives. Superman shows him around the world. But then the falling apart from the two begins when Brainiac goes, why haven't you conquered this world? This is when the problems begin. Ultimately, in the third act, Brainiac disguises himself as Superman's son Jason. Superman, thinking Jason is Brainiac, kills his actual son by accident. So you can imagine how compelling, because how would Richard White and Lois Lane feel about Superman then? It would create a huge thing. And you've got a cliffhanger situation for a third movie as well. So I absolutely believe that Superman Returns deserved its sequel, despite what it made. And initially, before the Writers Guild of America's writers' strike, they were going forward with a sequel. It had been announced. After that, they decided to hold off. Now, this was back in 2008, 2009. So they decided to do Man of Steel in 2011. That's when they also decided to cancel Smallville. So Man of Steel got a sequel, but didn't get a sequel because it doesn't touch on a lot of the themes from Man of Steel BVS. It doesn't. We see Ben Affleck's perspective of the Battle of Metropolis, and that's great, but we never hear the Codex mentioned again. And the Codex is got so much potential to it. And I think this is the Man of Steel sequel that people are fighting for today. This is the Man of Steel sequel Henry Cavill wanted as well. So it's kind of, in the past few years, the last two Superman films we've had haven't really had a direct enough sequel, even though BVS does touch on a lot of the themes of Man of Steel. And BVS is a Man of Steel sequel, maybe not the right Man of Steel sequel. I really like BVS, but in terms of it being a direct enough sequel, I don't think that it was. But going back to Superman Returns, I think there was enough potential. There was enough people who were interested in this film. I think the second film would have done better. One of the things Warner Brothers said to Brian was, we want more action. Something Brian was willing to work on, which he would have worked on, because Brian really looked at the character nuances in Superman Returns rather than, a superhero fighting a supervillain. It was actually kind of refreshing from the movies today, because Superman Returns doesn't have a superhero-supervillain CGI battle. He's literally got to save the world from this calamity that Lex Luthor's created. I mean, it is very similar to what we see in Superman the movie. Things are exploding, he's got to pick things up, he's got to save people that way. But Brian was making this film to kind of make a remake stroke sequel of Superman the movie. That's the truth, and he never really knew what his movie was. But that didn't create wholehearted problems in terms of a sequel, because he had a really good idea for a sequel. I mean, no one else has even thought about doing a Brainiac Superman movie, apart from Brian. And there's lots of issues with Bryan Singer in the real world, and I don't want to go into that. We're just talking about the man as a director, a creative, and an artist. This is what we're talking about. So I just think it was a mistake not to give the man a sequel, because as I say, I think his idea for the sequel was so fantastic. And I think, as I say, I think this is a mistake, because I think he had a great Superman. His Lois Lane was okay. I mean, if he really wanted to, he could have recast Lois Lane, but it wouldn't have been worth it. I think people would have got used to her after a while. Spacey was a great Lex Luthor, quite different to Hackman's Lex Luthor, with some nuance and connections from Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor, but doing more from really what we were seeing in Smallville with Michael Rosenbaum, where people really liked it. As Kevin Spacey said, people like their Lex bald, so he made the effort to shave his head off, so not his head, but his hair off. And so he really did feel like a great Lex Luthor, in my opinion. And I just think the sequel could have fixed any issues people had with the first movie. But I still feel the first movie is pretty good. And as I say, the first movie is trying to touch on some certain things from the first movie. Singer was obsessed with Dick Donner's Superman the movie, no question. Probably a little bit too obsessed, which caused problems. But as I say, I think that Bryan Singer's a great filmmaker, a great director, a great storyteller. Obviously this can't happen now, because Bryan Singer's been ousted from the industry because of the serious crimes he's been accused of. I don't even think he's faced any jail time. The crimes we're talking about are utterly, utterly serious. But I don't really want to go into that, because we're talking about Bryan Singer, the director. So as I say, I think the sequel would have been amazing. I think Superman killing his own son by accident would have been sensational. Maybe it would have been divisive. I mean, it's not like we've never had a divisive Superman film before, is it? Although then we hadn't done. Superman Returns wasn't really a divisive movie, People just wanted to see more action in it. That's the problem people had. And a lot of people had an issue with him continuing the Christopher Reeve Superman as well. People wanted to see something new. I just feel if that film had a lot more kick to it, a lot more action, nobody would have cared about those issues. Even if they didn't think Kate Bosworth was a great Lois Lane, I don't think they would have, they would have made it a deal breaker. Superman Returns has lots of great elements. One of the great elements, of course, it keeps John Williams' original theme. I forgot the guy's name. He edited the film and he did the musical score. And John Ottman did a wonderful job, not only by editing the picture, but by scoring the music. That is one of the best Superman scores I've ever heard. Not that I don't love Hans Zimmer's Superman Man of Steel score, because it's amazing. Interestingly enough, the Superman Returns sequel would have been called Superman Man of Steel. Singer understanding that not everyone knows that Superman is also known as the Man of Steel. So Superman Man of Steel would have actually been a great title. And so Brian explained it as a Wrath of Khan kind of movie, a revenge type of movie as well. So very, very interesting what else he would have utilised in this film. But bringing Brainiac in, having Clark kill his own son by accident, when I heard that was his plan, and I read some of the script myself, I thought, this film is going to be awesome. And Superman Man of Steel would have been awesome. It's always something I've regretted that I didn't see. I remember when I heard they were doing it and what they were doing, I was incredibly excited for it. I was a big Superman Returns fan. And even though in places Superman Returns can feel a bit underwhelming, it's still a really, really good start. I think Superman Returns is a good start. And yes, as I've mentioned the mistakes I think he made. Not making it look like Donner's World was a mistake. He made it look like his own version of Superman. Well, if you're going to do that, you can't continue from Donner's Superman, can you? You either embrace that man's world or you don't. That's part of the problem. Now, the issue of him having Superman have a son called Jason. Again, this was another issue that people were kind of split on. I just said literally Jason is Superboy. In a way. But in the comics, Superboy is literally Lex Luthor taking his own DNA and Superman's DNA and creating a clone. Why didn't they do that? Why didn't Brian do that? I think part of the issue is that Brian didn't know comic books so well. He wanted to make these characters movies. He wanted to tell these characters stories, but he didn't know the comic books so well. He didn't follow them as a young kid. And I think that's part of the problem if you don't know the material you're working with. So Jason could, it was a good idea because Superman and Lois make love in Superman 2. So he's thinking, fuck it, they had a kid. But Superman's been gone for 5 years. He literally pissed off as soon as Superman 2 finished. So he doesn't even know he has a kid. He works it out by the end of the movie. And by the way, one of the most beautiful elements of Superman Returns is when Brandon Routh as Superman is reciting Marlon Brando's speech to his son Jason in the bedroom while he thinks Jason's asleep. I don't think a Superman actor has made a narrative performance like that before so good. In terms of performing a line of dialogue. And Ralph proved how good he is at his craft. And as I say, I have a lot of time for Brandon Routh. I hope we see him in the Flash movie. I think we will. But he's a great Superman. Now, the problem you give Brandon in this film is you want him to be the iconic Christopher Reeve Superman. No one can really do that. Some people call his performance an impression of Christopher Reeve. I don't even think it's an impression. He does the glasses thing. But I think actually, again, Brandon does his own thing. And it really, really works. Because it does, even though it's a direct sequel to Superman 2, he doesn't actually have to mimic Christopher Reeve. He can just be his own Superman because he's been away for 5 years. He's had new experiences. He can act a bit different. It's fine. In fact, there should have been some kind of... the Return to Krypton sequence either could have been, a pre-opening credit sequence, which I think would have been amazing. Because the actual opening credits of Superman Returns are his journey in his ship back to Earth. So it all works out. You make that the opening credit scene, a pre-opening credit scene, it really does work. Or you can just make it a flashback. That would have been even more awesome. So, me and Brian don't agree on this. That the Return to Krypton sequence was ever so important, and it would have made Superman Returns more relatable, because he's been away for 5 years. You know, what's he been doing? He tells Lois what he's been doing, but sometimes show is better than tell. I think most of the time, especially for this audience that likes to be spoon-fed, I think people seeing that and maybe seeing him exploring Krypton a little bit, and then he gets like infected with kryptonite and he has to leave. It's a great sequence. You can go and check it out on YouTube, or if you've got Superman Returns, I think it's on there. I've got it on my version of Superman Returns. Unfortunately, my Superman Returns is slightly scratched near the end, when Superman discovers New Krypton and he faces off with Lex at the beginning. That's where my copy's scratched, but I can still see the Return to Krypton sequence, which is really, really cool. As I say, I've got a lot of time for Superman Returns, and I actually really like the way Singer shot this movie. This movie was shot beautifully. Superman looks amazing. A lot of people have got, you know, issues with the costume. The costume could have been changed. I'm actually so surprised that no director has ever given Superman in a motion picture one of the costumes from the comics. I don't get that. They always want to make their own costume, and that's a shame, because I think there's so many wonderful versions of the costume in the comics. Just fucking use one, right? Just use one. That's my opinion on that. But yeah, I love Superman Returns. I think it's a very interesting movie, but it's not for everyone. Some people just want to be blinded by action. But this film has a lot of dialogue. It has a narrative. It has a nuance. It's about someone, you know, do we need Superman to catch us when we fall? Do we need this figure to help us? Of course humanity needs a figure to help them, because humanity actually in the real world doesn't have a figure to protect them. Everyone has their own agendas. Well, Superman doesn't, because that's not how Superman was brought up or trained by Jor-El. So apart from the kind of little changes I would have made with Terence Stamp as Jor-El, and Jor-El again, I'm making that mistake again, Terence Stamp as Zod, I would have used him. He would have been trapped in the fortress from Superman 2. I think that would have really worked. But apart from these little nitpicks I have with the movie, also the CGI when he's flying over the earth at the end isn't great. You can see his face looks really animated. That was bad by Brian. I don't know what went wrong there. But ultimately, I really like Superman Returns, and I think a sequel would have been absolutely fantastic. Now, let's move on to another previous DC movie, The Dark Knight. I really like The Dark Knight, but I don't think it's the best film of all time, and I don't think it's the best comic book film of all time. I actually found The Dark Knight quite underwhelming, because I was obsessed, before The Dark Knight, I was obsessed with Batman Begins. I think Batman Begins has the perfect balance of enough face time with Christian Bale as Bruce Wayne and enough Batman face time. I don't really recall seeing enough Christian Bale Bruce Wayne face time in The Dark Knight. This film is about the Joker, and Ledger's Joker is awesome. This is why everyone likes this film. But there's not many nuances or great narratives for Bruce Wayne and Christian Bale to get his teeth into. It's only really when Rachel dies that we get to see a bit more Bruce Wayne and Batman face time, and we see how great Bale is at displaying that nuance. But for me, because Joker's story isn't really a story, he's just trying to show the world how immoral they are. That's what he's trying to do here. This is the most intelligent version of live-action Joker I have ever seen. What he does is sensational. You know, he wants to prove that the world is corrupt. He wants to prove to Batman that everyone, including him, Batman himself, is as corrupt as he is. And in the end, he doesn't get to prove that. And, you know, I mean, listen, you look at The Dark Knight and you think of Rachel. Apart from dying, what was the point of Rachel in The Dark Knight? Now, because we lost the original actress, right, which was a shame because I really liked her as Rachel, they changed the actress. I didn't see the point in doing that, because at the end of Batman Begins, Rachel literally says, you're not the man I fell in love with, and maybe he'll come back when Gotham City doesn't need the Batman anymore. So she's kind of saying we can never be together. So in a lot of ways, there's no point of her because of the way they set her up in the first film. So they didn't really need to bring her back. Obviously, her death is very important to what happens to Two-Face. So she's literally just there for that reason. The thing is, because he wants to do the Two-Face thing. You see, Two-Face, obviously, we get Harvey Dent, and there's a lot of nuance there, a great performance, well-written character. And then it's kind of the origin story before he becomes Two-Face, and I get it, but then Two-Face is just killed off. I don't like these villains being killed off, these iconic villains, but then Nolan was only telling a trilogy, so he didn't care. I like The Dark Knight. It's a very, very good film, but I don't believe it's as good as Batman Begins. And I don't care about the box office of The Dark Knight. But this is what I keep on telling you about the Joker uprising a box office. We've seen it everywhere. Think about every movie he's been in. Batman 89. The Dark Knight. The Joker movie. The Suicide Squad film, the first one. Every one of those films, it's the only reason those films were successful. Take Ledger's performance as the Joker out of The Dark Knight. You have literally got nothing. But if you take Liam Neeson out of Batman Begins, Jesus Christ, you've still got a great movie. Because Batman Begins is a hero's journey. That's what I like about it. We see him explore the world, explore the criminal fraternity. That actually makes great sense, doesn't it? That someone looking to be a vigilante is investigating and researching the criminal fraternity. So although I love The Dark Knight, I don't think it's a better film than Batman Begins. I think Batman Begins is brilliant, and you actually get to spend some time with Bruce Wayne as Bruce Wayne, not just as Batman. And Nolan explores the psychosis of this character, the emotional pain of this character, going through what he went through. There is action in this movie, but there's just as many emotional beats as action. In a lot of ways, it's the perfect movie. That is my favourite Batman movie, and Batman Returns comes second. A very different film, by the way, but I like that film for very different reasons. But I just think Batman Begins is just brilliant. I mean, I could even controversially say that Christian Bale deserved an Oscar for his performance as Bruce Wayne in that film. So as I say, I'm not shitting on The Dark Knight. I'm saying, from my personal perspective, it isn't as satisfying as the first film. Because I believe we've foregone Christian Bale's screen time. Christian Bale is one of the best actors that we have. And we didn't see much of him. We saw more of him as Batman than we did as Bruce Wayne. And that's what we had in the first film. We had as much Bruce Wayne as we had Batman. Were telling his story. So how would I have changed The Dark Knight? Well, it's interesting because, as I say, if you get rid of Rachel, you lose the Two-Face situation. Or maybe the Two-Face situation can be swapped around. I don't know. So let's just say we get rid of Rachel. So I don't think there's any point to Rachel. She's important in terms of her dying and, you know, making Harvey become Two-Face. I understand that. But that's the only purpose she serves. And I know there's this desperation of Bruce Wayne in the film to stop being Batman so he can be with her. I don't like that motivation, by the way. And it becomes a motivation in the second film, in the third film with Selina Kyle, where he's either not, however you want to see it, or is sitting in a table in France, I think, with Selina Kyle after just knowing her for like one movie. So I don't like that either. I think that end bit ruined the film for me, because The Dark Knight Rises has got some great themes in it, and I kind of enjoy it. I think there's elements of Dark Knight Rises I prefer to the second movie, The Dark Knight. So let's just say we get rid of Rachel and she doesn't die. But instead, Alfred is killed by the Joker instead. Imagine what that does. Imagine the food and drink to the actor that is Christian Bale that would be. Imagine his performance. He goes off the fucking rails. He starts hunting down the Joker. And something kicks off. And in a melee or something, because of the Joker and because of Batman, Harvey Dent becomes Harvey Two-Face. And that's how he's born. And he blames Batman and the Joker. And then he becomes the fucking villain of the story. And so you still got the same theme. And maybe Batman and the Joker actually have to stick together to beat him. That would have been interesting as well. Listen, I'm not saying that's what should happen. I'm saying maybe that's how I would change it. But honestly, for me, Batman Begins is the best out of the Dark Knight trilogy, in my opinion. And that's what I think of that. This has been the Movies TV Mad Daily. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. Don't forget to subscribe. Please subscribe if you haven't. Please click that little notification bell so you never miss anything of this perfection. I will see you again in the next video. Until then, goodbye.